The grand ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton sparkled with crystal chandeliers and white roses, every detail perfect for my cousin Emma's wedding. 300 guests mingled during cocktail hour, their designer gowns and tailored tuxedos creating a sea of understated wealth and social prominence. I stood near the bar in my simple navy dress, department store not designer, watching my family work the room like the social professionals they were. I'm Jessica Chin, though my family had taken to introducing me with creative disclaimers lately. This is our Jessica, she's between opportunities. At 31, I was the black sheep who'd walked away from a prestigious consulting career to chase what they called tech fantasies. What they didn't know was that those fantasies had built me a company worth more than everyone in this room combined. Jessica, darling, my Aunt Margaret approached with her signature air kiss greeting. I heard you're working with computers now. How modern of you. I smiled politely, taking a sip of champagne. Something like that. Well, everyone needs hobbies, she continued, then leaned closer conspiratorially. Your father mentioned you might be looking for something more stable soon. My friend Sandra runs a lovely boutique in the village. She could probably use help with inventory. A boutique. Inventory. I bit back the urge to mention that my hobby employed over 10,000 people across 6 countries, or that my last quarterly revenue exceeded the GDP of some small nations. That's very thoughtful, I replied instead. Across the room I watched my father, Dr. Richard Chin, holding court with his medical colleagues. Distinguished silver hair, perfectly pressed tuxedo, radiating the kind of authority that came from 30 years of cardiac surgery. He'd built his reputation on precision, control, and never showing weakness. Having a daughter who played with computers, instead of following a respectable professional path, was his personal nightmare. My mother, Elizabeth, glided between groups with practiced grace, her Chanel gown and understated jewelry marking her as old money despite our family's more modest origins. She'd married up when she caught my father's attention during his residency, and she'd spent the last 3 decades perfecting the art of social navigation. Jessica. My brother David appeared at my elbow, looking every inch the successful investment banker in his bespoke suit. Mom's looking for you. Something about the family photos. Lead the way, I said, following him through the crowd. We found the family gathered near the ornate fireplace, photographer arranging us by height and importance. Emma, radiant in her Vera Wang gown, beamed beside her new husband. Her parents, my Uncle Thomas and Aunt Patricia, flanked them proudly. The extended family filled in around them. Doctors, lawyers, business executives, all exactly what they appeared to be. And then there was me. Jessica, dear, the photographer called out, could you move to the back? Behind your cousin Michael. I slipped into position, familiar with being tucked away where my failure wouldn't show too prominently in family documentation. Michael, a corporate lawyer, gave me a sympathetic pat on the shoulder. Don't worry, Jess, he whispered. Everyone goes through rough patches. You'll figure it out. If only he knew that my last rough patch involved deciding whether to accept Goldman Sachs' acquisition offer or take my company public. I'd chosen neither, preferring to maintain control while we expanded into artificial intelligence. After photos, the family scattered back to their social duties. I was heading toward the terrace for some air when I overheard my father's voice from behind a marble pillar. Don't mention what Jessica does, he was saying to my great-uncle William and his wife. It's embarrassing. She left a perfectly good consulting position to play with computers. We're hoping she'll come to her senses soon. Great-uncle William made a sympathetic noise. Young people today, they all think they can be entrepreneurs. No understanding of real work. Exactly, my father continued. She's living in some tiny apartment, driving a beat-up Honda, pretending she's building some kind of tech company. It's been 3 years of this nonsense. What kind of tech company? Great-aunt Helen asked. Something called Neuralink Technologies, my father said with evident distaste. Sounds like science fiction to me. Elizabeth and I are at our wits' end. Neuralink Technologies. My little company that had revolutionized machine learning, held over 200 patents, and had partnerships with every major tech giant in Silicon Valley. The same company that President Biden had mentioned in his State of the Union address as representing America's technological leadership. But to my father it was just embarrassing. I was about to slip away when Emma's wedding planner appeared, tapping a microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, Please take your seats. Dinner will be served shortly, but first, we have a special surprise for Emma and James. The lights dimmed as massive screens descended from the ceiling. Emma's father has arranged for us to watch tonight's big game during dinner. Nothing says romance like the Super Bowl. A cheer went up from the crowd. Uncle Thomas had always been a football fanatic, and apparently he'd convinced Emma that sharing the big game with their wedding guests would be memorable. The screens flickered to life just as the game was returning from halftime. And now, the announcer's voice boomed through the ballroom sound system, one of our most anticipated commercials of the night. I nearly choked on my champagne. This wasn't just any commercial break. This was the moment I'd been preparing for since my marketing team pitched the idea 6 months ago. Our first major brand campaign, designed to introduce Neuralink technologies to mainstream America. The screen filled with a sleek, futuristic laboratory. A young woman in a lab coat turned to face the camera, her eyes bright with innovation and possibility. "What if your phone could think?" she asked. "What if your car could learn? What if artificial intelligence could solve humanity's greatest challenges?" My father's voice carried across the silent ballroom. "Elizabeth, isn't that?" The camera pulled back to reveal the woman standing in front of a massive logo. Neuralink Technologies. Then my face appeared on screen, not the department store dress version standing in the ballroom, but the polished CEO version my company had spent a fortune perfecting. "I'm Jessica Chin, founder and CEO of Neuralink Technologies," my recorded voice said confidently. "For the past 5 years, we've been building the future of human-AI collaboration." The commercial continued, showing our technology in action. Smart cities, medical diagnostics, climate modeling, while my voice narrated our vision. At Neuralink, we don't just imagine tomorrow. We build it. The final shot showed me standing on the rooftop of our headquarters in Palo Alto, the San Francisco skyline glittering behind me. Neuralink Technologies. Intelligence redefined. The commercial ended. The ballroom remained silent except for the distant sounds of football commentary that nobody was listening to anymore. 300 pairs of eyes turned toward me like I was an exhibit that had suddenly come to life. The woman they'd been politely ignoring, the family disappointment hiding in the back row, was apparently a billionaire tech CEO with her face on national television. That was... Emma started, then stopped, her mouth hanging open. My father looked like he'd been struck by lightning. "Jessica?" I set down my champagne glass and smoothed my simple dress. "Yes, Dad. That commercial, that was you." "Yes, it was. But you said you were working on a small tech startup." I smiled, the same polite smile I'd been wearing all evening. "I never said it was small. You assumed that." Great-Uncle William, who moments earlier had been discussing my embarrassing career choices, now stared at me with new interest. "Neuralink Technologies. I've heard that name. Aren't you the company that just partnered with NASA?" "Among others," I confirmed. "We're providing AI systems for the Mars mission planning. Should be announced officially next week." Aunt Margaret, who'd suggested I work retail inventory, fumbled for her phone. "I need to Google something," she muttered, then looked up with wide eyes. "Forbes says you're worth, it says here $12 billion. "Approximately," I replied. "The valuation fluctuates with market conditions." The silence stretched until David finally found his voice. "12 billion? Jessica, that makes you the richest person in this room," I finished. "By several $1 billion, actually." Uncle Thomas, father of the bride, looked like he might faint. "But the apartment, the car." "I own 73 properties across 4 countries," I said. "The apartment in Soma is just convenient to the office. And the Honda has great safety ratings. When you're worth 12 billion, you can drive whatever makes you happy." My mother had gone completely pale. "Jessica, why didn't you tell us?" "Tell you what, Mom? That I was successful? When was I supposed to do that? During the lectures about abandoning my consulting career? The suggestions that I get a real job? The family gatherings where you introduced me as your daughter who was finding herself?" The wedding guests had formed a semicircle around us, creating an impromptu amphitheater for our family drama. Emma's perfect wedding had become the Jessica Chin revelation show. "We thought you were struggling," my father said weakly. "I was struggling," I agreed. "Struggling to build revolutionary technology while my own family acted like I was unemployed." struggling to maintain relationships with people who saw my life's work as a phase I'd grow out of. I pulled out my phone, opening my notes app. Would you like to see my schedule for next week? Monday, keynote at the World Economic Forum. Tuesday, Senate hearing on AI regulation where I'm the primary witness. Wednesday, meeting with the Secretary of Defense about national security applications. Thursday, lunch with the President's science advisor. Friday, I'm delivering the graduation address at MIT. Each item on the list hit my family like a physical blow. These weren't just business meetings, they were the kind of high-level engagements that made headlines. The President's science advisor? David repeated numbly. Dr. Patricia Williams. We've been collaborating on the National AI Initiative. I looked around at my family's stunned faces. She actually suggested I run for Congress next year. Said the country needs more tech leaders in government. Cousin Michael, who'd earlier offered me career sympathy, was scrolling frantically through his phone. There's an article here from last month. The most powerful women in tech, you're number 3, behind only the CEOs of Apple and Microsoft. Number 2 actually, I corrected. The rankings were updated after our partnership with Google was announced. Great Aunt Helen grabbed her husband's arm. William, remember that technology stock you said we should invest in? The one your broker recommended. Neuralink. He looked sick. We bought 100 shares at $12 each. Said it was speculative but promising. I smiled. It closed yesterday at $847 per share. Your 100 shares are worth about $85,000 now. His eyes bulged. We made $85,000? You invested in my company without knowing it, I confirmed. Happens more often than you'd think. About 60% of Fortune 500 companies use our AI systems in some capacity. The football game played on, forgotten while my family processed their new reality. The commercial had been scheduled to air during the Super Bowl because our marketing team wanted maximum impact for our brand launch. They probably hadn't anticipated it would also launch me out of family obscurity and into legendary status. Emma finally found her voice. Jessica, this is incredible. Why didn't you tell us you were building something this big? I looked at my cousin, beautiful and radiant in her wedding dress, and felt a familiar pang of sadness. Because none of you asked, Emma. In 3 years, not one person in this family asked me to explain what I was actually building. You just assumed I was failing because my version of success didn't look like yours. But we could have supported you, my mother protested. We could have been proud of you. You could have, I agreed. Instead, you spent 3 years being embarrassed by me. Dad literally just told Uncle William not to mention what I do because it's embarrassing. My father's face crumpled. Jessica, I didn't understand. You didn't try to understand, I said gently but firmly. There's a difference. The wedding planner appeared again, clearly flustered by the disruption to her carefully planned evening. Excuse me, but should we continue with dinner service? Of course, Emma said quickly. This is still my wedding. Jessica, please sit with us at the head table. I want to hear everything. I glanced at the head table where seating had been arranged by family importance and social status. My assigned seat was at table 7, tucked safely away with the distant relatives and family friends. That's very kind, I said, but I actually need to leave soon. I have a conference call with our Tokyo office in an hour, and then I'm flying to London tonight for a meeting with the Prime Minister's Technology Council. The casual mention of the Prime Minister hit like another bombshell. My family was learning that their embarrassing daughter apparently moved in the highest circles of global power. You're leaving? My father asked. But we need to talk. I need to apologize. To understand. I studied his face, seeing genuine remorse for perhaps the first time in years. We can talk, Dad. But it needs to be different than before. No more assumptions about what I should be doing with my life. No more suggestions that I get a real job. And definitely no more hiding me from relatives because my career choices embarrass you. He nodded quickly. Yes, of course. Whatever you want. What I want, I said, is what I've always wanted. A family that supports each other's dreams instead of judging them. A family that asks questions instead of making assumptions. A family that celebrates different kinds of success instead of only recognizing one narrow path. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. Car is waiting. Tokyo call in 45 minutes. I really do need to go, I said, gathering my small purse. Emma, congratulations on a beautiful wedding. I'm sorry the commercial timing was so dramatic. Emma hugged me tightly. Are you kidding? This is the most memorable wedding in family history. My grandchildren will be talking about the night cousin Jessica revealed she was a billionaire. As I headed toward the exit, my family followed like a confused entourage. They seemed unable to process that the person they'd been treating as a charity case was now walking away from them to conduct international business. Jessica, my mother called out. When can we see you again? When can we really talk? I paused at the ballroom entrance. I'll be back from London next Thursday. We could have dinner if you'd like. But Mom, I want you to understand something. I'm the same person I was an hour ago. The only thing that's changed is your perception of my worth. She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I understand. And Jessica? I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago. For the first time that evening, my smile was completely genuine. Thank you, Mom. That means everything to me. As I walked through the hotel lobby toward my waiting car, I could hear the buzz of conversation resuming in the ballroom. By tomorrow, the story would be family legend. The wedding where Jessica Chin went from embarrassment to tech royalty in the span of a 60-second commercial. My driver held the door open. Airport, Miss Chin? Yes, please. And Marcus? Could you put on the radio? I'd like to hear if they're discussing the commercial on the post-game show. As we pulled into traffic, the radio host's voice filled the car. That Neuralink Technologies spot was definitely one of tonight's most impressive ads. The company's stock is already up 12% in after-hours trading. I smiled, settling back in my seat. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's succeeding so spectacularly that your success becomes impossible to ignore. My phone showed 17 missed calls from family members and 43 text messages. I'd read them on the plane. Right now, I had a conference call to Tokyo, where my team was finalizing our expansion into quantum computing. The family who'd spent 3 years being embarrassed by my career would just have to wait. After all, I had a $12 billion empire to run. 3 weeks later, I sat in my corner office on the 42nd floor of Neuralink Tower, reading the morning's press coverage. The wedding commercial had generated more media attention than our marketing team had ever imagined. We'd been featured on the cover of Time magazine, profiled in Harvard Business Review, and I'd just finished a lengthy interview with 60 Minutes about the future of artificial intelligence. My assistant knocked on the door. Miss Chin, your father is here for your lunch appointment. Send him in, please. My father entered, looking smaller somehow in his simple business suit. Gone was the commanding presence I'd grown up intimidating. In its place was a man genuinely humbled by his own misconceptions. Jessica, he said, taking the chair across from my desk. Thank you for agreeing to see me. Of course, Dad. You're my father. He looked around the office, taking in the panoramic city views, the awards lining the walls, the multiple monitors displaying real-time data from our global operations. I've been doing research, he said finally. About your company, about what you've built. Jessica, I had no idea the scope of what you've accomplished. I tried to tell you, I said gently. Multiple times. But you were so focused on what you thought I should be doing that you never listened to what I was actually doing. He nodded, looking down at his hands. The cardiac surgery field is very traditional. Success looks a certain way. Medical school, residency, fellowship, hospital position, private practice. I couldn't understand how someone could build something meaningful outside that structure. But I did build something meaningful. We're not just making money, Dad. We're solving problems that matter. Our medical AI has already diagnosed diseases that human doctors missed. Our climate modeling is helping prevent natural disasters. Our transportation systems are making cities safer and more efficient. I know, he said. I spent last week reading every article I could find about Neuralink. Your work on early cancer detection. Jessica, that's going to save millions of lives. For the first time in years, I heard genuine pride in his voice. That's what I've been trying to tell you. This isn't just about computers or making money. It's about using technology to solve human problems on a scale that was never possible before. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city bustling below us. Your mother wants to have a family dinner, he said eventually. A real one where we actually listen to each other. Where we celebrate what you've accomplished instead of trying to fix what we thought was broken. I'd like that, I said. But Dad, there's something else we need to discuss. I turned to my computer, pulling up a foundation website. I've been thinking about legacy, about what really matters. So I'm starting the Chin Foundation for Educational Innovation. The goal is to provide STEM education and entrepreneurship training to underserved communities. His eyes lit up as he read the mission statement. This is wonderful, Jessica. How can we help? Actually, I was hoping you'd consider joining the board. Your medical background would be invaluable for our healthcare innovation initiatives. And Mom's experience with nonprofit management could help us structure our educational programs. You want us involved? I want my family involved in something meaningful. Not because you're trying to fix me, but because we can accomplish more together than apart. My phone chimed with a reminder. I have to go soon, meeting with the Joint Chiefs about cybersecurity. But Dad, there's one more thing. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a framed photo. It was from my college graduation, the day I'd announced my intention to start a tech company. In the picture, my father was shaking his head while my mother looked worried. I was smiling, completely confident in my vision despite their disapproval. I've kept this on my desk for 8 years, I said, as a reminder of why I was working so hard. Not to prove you wrong, but to prove myself right. He studied the photo, his face softening. You were so sure of yourself even then. I believed in what I was building. I just wish you had believed in me too. I believe in you now, he said firmly. And Jessica, for what it's worth, I'm incredibly proud to be your father. Even if it took me too long to realize what an extraordinary woman you've become. As he left, I turned back to my computer, opening the agenda for our board meeting that afternoon. We were discussing our expansion into educational technology, partnerships with major universities, and the development of AI tutoring systems that could personalize learning for every student. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Saw you on the cover of Time. Dad's framing it for the office. You're officially the family's favorite success story now. I smiled, looking out over the city that had become the headquarters of my empire. Being the family's favorite success story was nice, but it wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was that I'd built something meaningful, something that would outlast quarterly earnings and magazine covers. Something that would make the world better long after the wedding commercial was forgotten. Though I had to admit the commercial had been pretty effective. Our stock was up 40% since the Super Bowl, and we'd received over 10,000 resumes from talented engineers who wanted to join our mission. Sometimes the best marketing strategy is simply being too successful to ignore. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Miss Chin, your car is ready for the Pentagon meeting. I gathered my files, straightened my jacket, and headed out to my next appointment. Just another day in the life of the family embarrassment who accidentally became a billionaire tech mogul. The wedding story had already become family legend, but I was just getting started. After all, revolutionizing artificial intelligence was only the beginning of what I planned to accomplish. And this time my family would be watching with pride instead of embarrassment.
I never thought I'd be writing this story, but here I am, Alex Morgan, about to tell you how I lost everything I worked for, and then got it all back in ways nobody saw coming. 3 years ago, I joined Quantum Dynamics as a junior developer. Fresh out of college with a degree in AI and machine learning, I was eager to prove myself. The company wasn't anything special, a mid-sized software firm that created decent business applications, but nothing groundbreaking. That was about to change, though they didn't know it yet. My boss, Richard Blake, was what you'd call a corporate survivor. 20 years in the industry without creating anything significant, but somehow always managing to be near success when it happened. He had a talent for taking credit for other people's innovations. I just didn't know that when I started. Keep it simple, Morgan, he'd always say, reviewing my code. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. But that's exactly what I was doing, just not during office hours. Every night, after my regular work was done, I stayed late in my small cubicle, working on something that had been brewing in my mind since graduate school, an AI system that could predict and prevent cyber attacks before they happened. Not just basic threat detection, but true predictive defense, using advanced neural networks and quantum computing principles. I called it Guardian. The name was simple, but what it could do was revolutionary. While other security systems reacted to threats, Guardian could see them coming. It learned, adapted, and evolved faster than any attack could develop. But more importantly, it could do something no other system could. It could understand intent. My breakthrough came during a late-night coding session, fueled by energy drinks and determination. I figured out how to make the AI recognize patterns in human behavior before they manifested into actual cyber threats. It wasn't just reading code, it was reading people. "You're here late again, Alex," our security guard, Mike, would say during his rounds. "Working on something big?" "Just some personal projects, Mike," I'd reply, careful to minimize my screens. Mike was friendly, but I'd learned to be cautious. In tech, ideas are more valuable than gold. I wasn't being paranoid. I'd seen what happened to other developers who shared too much too soon. Their ideas mysteriously appeared in projects led by senior staff, their contributions forgotten. For months, I refined Guardian in secret, using my own equipment, my own time. The company's network was my testing ground, though nobody knew it. Every attempted intrusion, every potential breach, Guardian caught them all, quietly, without anyone noticing. I documented everything meticulously, storing backups in multiple secure locations. I knew I'd need proof someday. Then came the day that changed everything. I'd finally completed Guardian's core architecture. It wasn't just good, it was revolutionary. Independent tests showed it could prevent 99.9% of cyber attacks before they even began. The remaining 0.1%, those were caught and neutralized within microseconds. I decided it was time to show Richard. Despite his flaws, he was still my boss. And I thought he'd recognize the potential and help me bring it to market the right way. I scheduled a meeting for a Thursday morning, brought in my laptop, my documentation, everything needed to demonstrate Guardian's capabilities. Richard listened, his expression unreadable as I walked him through the system. "This is interesting," he said finally, leaning back in his chair. "How long have you been working on this?" "About 2 years," I replied. "I've got all the development logs, test results." "Using company resources?" he interrupted. "No, sir. This was all done on my own time, my own equipment. I have records." He held up his hand, stopping me. "Send me everything. All the documentation, all the code. I'll need to review it properly." Something in his tone should have warned me, but I was too excited, too proud of what I'd created. I sent him everything that evening, even stayed late to answer his questions. He seemed genuinely interested, asking about implementation, scalability, market potential. I went home feeling optimistic. Finally, my work would be recognized. Finally, I'd make my mark in the industry. The next morning, I couldn't log into my work computer. System access denied. The screen read. I tried again. Save message. My phone buzzed. An email from HR requesting my immediate presence in their office. Walking down that hallway, past my coworkers' curious stares, I still didn't understand what was coming. Richard was there, along with Susan from HR and 2 security guards. On the conference room table was a stack of papers. "We've reviewed your activities, Morgan," Richard began, not even offering me a seat. "You violated your employment contract by developing competing software using company resources." "What?" "No, I didn't. I have proof." "We've found evidence on your work computer," he continued as if I hadn't spoken. code fragments, development logs, all during company time. My blood ran cold. He planted evidence. While reviewing my work, he'd been setting me up. That's not possible. I started, but Susan slid the papers toward me. This is your termination notice, she said, not unkindly, and a reminder of your non-compete agreement. The company retains all rights to any intellectual property developed during your employment. You can't. I began, but Richard cut me off. I can and I have. He smirked. You're just a junior developer, Morgan. Did you really think you could create something like this on your own? Security will escort you out. Don't bother taking anything from your desk. Company property. I stood there, mind racing. 2 years of work, my breakthrough, my future, all being stolen in broad daylight. But as I looked at Richard's smug face, something inside me calmed. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd seen everything. He hadn't. What Richard didn't know, couldn't know, was that Guardian had a special protocol buried deep in its core. A protocol that would activate exactly 30 days after any unauthorized attempt to modify its base code. And knowing Richard, he wouldn't be able to resist putting his own stamp on my work. I gathered my personal belongings under the guard's watchful eyes. As I walked out of the building, I heard Richard already on the phone. Yes, we're announcing it next month. The most advanced AI security system ever created. Yes, my team has been working on it in secret. I smiled slightly. In exactly 30 days, Quantum Dynamics was hosting a launch party for their revolutionary new security system. Every major tech journalist would be there. Every potential investor. Every industry leader. It would be quite a show. But that's not the end of this story. Not even close. It's just the beginning of how Richard Blake learned that sometimes the quiet ones are the ones you should watch out for. The first week after being fired was the hardest. Not because I'd lost my job. I had savings and knew I could find another position easily. No, it was watching Richard Blake systematically erase me from my own creation. Through my industry contacts, I learned that Richard had assigned a team of developers to refine Guardian. In reality, they were trying to obscure its origins, modifying code they didn't fully understand, exactly as I'd predicted. My small apartment became my command center. Multiple monitors displayed news feeds, company updates, and most importantly, Guardian's hidden diagnostic signals. You see, while Richard thought he had the complete system, he only had what I'd shown him. The real Guardian, the one I'd spent years developing, was far more sophisticated. They're making a mess of your code, said Marcus, my old college roommate who still worked at Quantum. He'd been keeping me updated, risking his own job because he believed in doing what was right. Blake's got them working around the clock, changing variable names, restructuring modules. He wants to erase any trace of your coding style. I nodded, watching my monitors. Every change they made appeared in my logs, every modification triggering silent alerts in my backup system. Keep watching, I replied. But be careful. I don't want you getting caught. Marcus wasn't my only ally. Sarah from the legal department reached out through a secure channel 3 days after my firing. What they did wasn't just unethical, she wrote. I've seen the timestamps on the evidence they used against you. They were created after you presented Guardian to Blake. I've made copies. I thanked her but warned her to stay quiet for now. The pieces were falling into place, but timing would be everything. 2 weeks after my firing, the tech blogs started buzzing. Quantum Dynamics was preparing to announce a revolutionary AI security system. The press release claimed Richard Blake had been developing it in secret for years. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so infuriating. But I stayed focused, watching through my monitors as Richard's team continued to modify Guardian. Every change they made strengthened the hidden protocol I'd embedded in its core. Like antibodies recognizing an invasion, the system was learning, adapting, preparing for the moment it would reveal the truth. They're planning a major launch party, Marcus informed me. Blake's invited every tech journalist in Silicon Valley. He's even gotten interest from military contractors. Of course he had. Guardian's potential applications were enormous. That's why I'd built in so many safeguards, including ethical protocols that prevented its use for offensive operations. I wondered if Richard had found those yet. Probably not. They were buried too deep, intertwined with the system's basic functions. 3 weeks after my firing, I received an unexpected email from Richard himself. "Alex, I hope you're doing well. After further review, I believe we may have acted hastily. Perhaps we could discuss a consulting role? Your insights might be valuable as we prepare for the launch." I had to admire his nerve. He was getting nervous. The modified Guardian wasn't behaving quite as expected. Small glitches were appearing, nothing major, but enough to worry someone taking credit for a system they didn't understand. I didn't respond. A few days later, another email arrived, this time offering a substantial settlement in exchange for my technical assistance and a non-disclosure agreement. Again, I didn't respond. Richard's desperation told me everything I needed to know. They couldn't fully control Guardian. "Blake's getting paranoid," Marcus reported. "He's got the team working weekends, trying to patch inconsistencies in the system. The more they change, the more unpredictable it becomes." I smiled, checking my countdown timer. 5 days until the launch party. 5 days until Guardian's hidden protocol would activate. Sarah sent me more evidence. Backdated documents Richard had created, manipulated timestamps, forged development logs. "I've secured copies off-site," she wrote, "just in case." The final week was the hardest. Watching, waiting, knowing that at any moment Richard might realize the true nature of what he'd stolen. But he was too arrogant, too convinced of his own cleverness. The day before the launch, I received one final email from Richard. The settlement offer had doubled, along with a thinly veiled threat about making sure you never work in this industry again. I drafted a simple reply, "Looking forward to tomorrow's presentation." That evening, I checked my systems one last time. Guardian's hidden protocols were primed and ready. Every modification Richard's team had made had only strengthened its core directives. Protect truth, expose deception, reveal corruption. Tomorrow, at exactly 2:30 p.m., during the main demonstration in front of hundreds of industry leaders, Guardian would do exactly what it was designed to do. Richard thought he was presenting a security system. He didn't realize he was actually triggering the most sophisticated truth detection protocol ever created. I went to bed that night feeling strangely calm. Tomorrow would either vindicate everything I'd worked for or destroy my career completely. There would be no middle ground. As I drifted off to sleep, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from Marcus. "Everything's set for tomorrow. You should see Blake's face when it happens." Indeed, tomorrow would be quite a show, but not the one Richard Blake was expecting. The day of the launch party dawned bright and clear. I watched the live stream from my apartment as hundreds of tech industry leaders filed into Quantum Dynamics' newly renovated conference center. Richard had spared no expense. Giant screens displayed Guardian's logo, which he'd redesigned. Champagne flowed freely, and a small army of PR people guided journalists to their seats. Marcus had set up a secure feed for me, showing multiple angles of the presentation room. I could see Richard in his element, working the crowd, shaking hands with venture capitalists and military contractors. He wore a new suit that probably cost more than my yearly salary. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard began precisely at 2:15 p.m., taking the stage to polite applause. Today, quantum dynamics revolutionizes cybersecurity forever. I checked my monitors. Guardian's hidden protocol was warming up, its core systems recognizing the unauthorized modifications exactly as designed. 15 minutes until activation. For the past 3 years, Richard continued, my team and I have been developing something extraordinary. An artificial intelligence security system that doesn't just react to threats, it predicts them. On the massive screens behind him, Guardian's interface came to life. I had to admit, they'd done a good job with the visual redesign. Too bad they hadn't spent as much time understanding the core architecture. Allow me to demonstrate, Richard said, moving to a computer terminal. We've prepared a simulated cyber attack. 10 minutes until activation. My phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. Board members all present. Military contractors too. Even the SEC is here. Perfect. Richard was in his element now, showing off Guardian's basic features. The system smoothly deflected his simulated attacks, drawing appreciative murmurs from the crowd. Of course, it worked perfectly. I designed it to handle threats far more sophisticated than these demonstrations. 5 minutes. But the real breakthrough, Richard announced, is Guardian's ability to learn and adapt. Watch as it recognizes patterns and... A small alert appeared in the corner of his screen. He faltered for just a moment, then continued, trying to minimize the window. But Guardian was waking up. 2:30 p.m. The massive screens flickered. Richard's demonstration froze. Minor technical issue, he said smoothly. As I was saying, unauthorized modifications detected, Guardian's voice announced, cutting through the room's speakers. Initiating system verification protocol. Richard's face went pale. He tried to override the system, but his commands were rejected. Identity verification required, Guardian continued. Analyzing development history. The screens shifted, displaying side-by-side comparisons. My original, elegant code versus the clumsy modifications Richard's team had made. Timestamps, documentation, and Git commits appeared, showing the project's true history. Primary developer identified. Alexander Morgan, Guardian announced. Current system compromised by unauthorized changes implemented by Richard Blake. The room erupted in whispers. Richard frantically typed at his terminal, trying to regain control. Displaying evidence of intellectual property theft. Sarah's carefully gathered documentation appeared on screen. The backdated files, the forged timestamps, the falsified development logs. Then came the emails. Richard's increasingly desperate settlement offers, his threats, his attempts to cover his tracks. Ladies and gentlemen, Guardian's voice continued, this system was designed with one primary directive, to protect truth and expose deception. The current demonstration has been compromised by systematic intellectual property theft. Military contractors were already heading for the exits. Board members huddled in urgent discussion. Journalists were frantically taking notes. This is ridiculous, Richard shouted, his composure finally breaking. This is just a disgruntled ex-employee's sabotage. Accessing original development servers, Guardian interrupted. the screens filled with video footage from my late-night coding sessions, security logs showing my access patterns, original design documents with my digital signatures. Then came the final blow. Guardian displayed Richard's own code modifications, showing how each change he'd made to hide my work had actually triggered more detailed documentation of his theft. System integrity compromised, Guardian announced, initiating emergency protocols. The screens went dark. When they came back online, a simple message appeared. Guardian AI security system created by Alexander Morgan, patent pending. The room exploded into chaos. I watched through the feed as Richard was approached by several grim-faced board members. In the background, I could see SEC representatives taking notes. My phone buzzed again. "Marcus, you seeing this? Blake looks like he's about to faint." I was seeing it. 3 years of work, months of preparation, all leading to this moment. But I wasn't done yet. Standing up from my monitors, I straightened my tie and grabbed my jacket. Time for Phase 2. 20 minutes later, I walked into Quantum Dynamics Conference Center. The launch party had devolved into a crisis management session. Richard was surrounded by angry board members and lawyers. "Mr. Morgan," called a voice. I turned to see Linda Chen, CEO of the largest cybersecurity firm in Silicon Valley. "I believe we need to talk about Guardian's real capabilities." Over the next 2 hours, I demonstrated Guardian's true potential, not just its security features, but its ethical protocols, its learning capabilities, its ability to adapt and evolve while maintaining absolute integrity. Richard was escorted out by security, his career in shambles. The board convened an emergency session, and by evening, I had an offer. Full ownership of Guardian's patents, a substantial settlement for the theft attempt, and a new position as Chief Technology Officer at a much higher salary. But I declined. Linda Chen's offer was better. My own division, complete autonomy, and a partnership stake in her company. Plus, she understood the ethical implications of Guardian's capabilities. 1 year later, Guardian is the industry standard in AI security, protecting networks while ensuring corporate transparency. Richard? Last I heard, he was facing multiple lawsuits and an SEC investigation. Turns out Guardian wasn't the only project he'd stolen over the years. Sometimes, when I'm working late at my new office, I think about that launch party. About Richard's face when he realized what was happening. He thought he was stealing a security system, but what he really did was trigger the most sophisticated truth detection protocol ever created. The irony? If he'd just been honest, I would have worked with him to develop Guardian properly. But he chose deception, and in doing so, he armed my creation against himself. These days, companies use Guardian not just to protect against external threats, but to ensure internal integrity. Every time it catches someone trying to steal credit for another's work, I smile, remembering Richard's face at that launch party. Because sometimes the best security system isn't just about protecting data. Sometimes it's about protecting truth itself. And sometimes the quiet developer in the corner office isn't just writing code. Sometimes they're creating justice.
My name is Angelique, and I've just graduated from college. I'm a newbie at my job, undergoing the standard new employee training, akin to orientation, on my day off. My best friend, whom I've known since kindergarten and all through high school, asked me about it with curiosity. Though we attended the same college, we pursued different majors. She continued on to grad school, so she's keen on my transition into working adult life. "You won't believe it," I said, recounting my experience. "We start with a morning run every day as part of building our stamina." "Really?" "Everyone," she exclaimed, evidently surprised by the rigor. "It seems so. It's like a first taste of the toughness of working life." Unless there's a specific reason, everyone up to their second year participates. Those with 3 years or more are exempt. But still, about half of the entire company joins in. The other half opts for activities like crosswords or brain training exercises. Whoa, interesting. I totally skipped the exercise part though, she chuckled, amused. Our company motto is also unique, I continued. It's something like always be healthy, work hard, play hard, and live a long, active life. So, for the first 30 minutes after starting work, we have time for physical and mental exercises. That is really unique, she remarked. I can interact with people from all ages and departments. It feels like an extension of a club or group in school. It's fun. I really do love the company I've joined. But don't you seem kind of tired? You're really observant, I replied, somewhat taken aback by her sharp observation. Yes, overall the atmosphere at the company is okay. But there is one, if not the only colossal obstacle, a supremely arrogant individual who stands in my way. You want to quit? She asked, concerned. Oh, I see. Just as I thought, you lack determination. I smiled, shaking my head. The woman who is my manager is complaining bitterly on a call with a part-timer who has been absent for a few days. Her loud voice, meant to be heard, seems to be filled with malice, pushing the other person into a corner. The manager, whispered as the queen of damaging sighs, has the destructive power to completely demoralize the person on the receiving end of her tirade, I explained. She's like, I'm taking a break, and then all of a sudden doesn't show up for days, neglecting her duties. And now she says she's quitting. How carefree. Just because she's part-time doesn't mean I'll let her get away with this. I'll push her to the very end. This goes beyond sarcasm. It's downright terrifying, I continued. The last day the part-timer came in, I noticed her body stiffened, tears welling up in her eyes. What's wrong? Are you okay? I asked. She had been scolded by the manager again. She was trembling as she spoke. It must have taken a lot of courage for her to make this phone call. Since the manager has no choice but to accept her resignation, it would be better to just let her go without any more sarcastic remarks. It's been about a month since I joined the company. Considering that the first week was just going around and learning from all the departments in the company, I've encountered similar situations twice in the short span of 3 weeks, I sighed. It's so inconvenient. She hardly does her work and just drags everyone down. All I'm doing is pointing that out. The manager, secretly referred to as the empress in the company, always has deep wrinkles between her eyebrows. It takes effort to replace her. It's only natural that she should have the consideration to find a replacement and finish the handover before she quits, right? The tension spreads among the employees present as the manager seeks agreement, I explained. Everyone pretended to be focused on their work, nodding without making eye contact with the manager. However, she caught on. You seem to have a problem, she said, as I recalled the face of the part-timer. I found myself ensnared in the scrutinizing gaze of the empress. I'll ask you once you receive your salary. You should take responsibility for your work, right? Yes, I replied, feeling the weight of her deliberate question. There seemed to be no other option but to agree, and the manager knew it, directing the inquiry squarely at me. Do you think it's okay to act selfishly in the workplace? She continued. No, but selfishness is the enemy of work, right? I started to argue back, but her loud voice cut me off. In the end, I wasn't allowed to say anything. I regretted my inability to intervene for the crying part-timer and that I simply let the manager have her way. That's bound to stress you out. I'm sorry, I just keep complaining. I was supposed to be bragging about the company, but before I knew it, it was all just one-sided complaints. I lamented to my friend. It's okay, you can't keep things bottled up, and it's not your fault. If you resist too much, you'll be the next target. A manager who mixes up power and authority is the worst. Be careful not to get on her bad side, okay? She warned, offering solace. Thanks, I replied, feeling grateful for her understanding. Then I broached the main topic about the trip. I think I can cover the cost with my part-time job savings from college and my first paycheck. I'm thinking of taking my grandparents to the resort you told me about before. Do you think they'll be pleased? This was the real issue I wanted to discuss. She was well informed about traveling, having done so extensively with her family. Of course. The end is one that even my picky grandmother was completely satisfied with. You can't go wrong, she assured me with a smile. I'm glad. I really want to make it a good memory since we're doing it, I expressed, feeling relieved. I had been planning a trip with my grandparents using the money I had diligently saved up. They were the ones who raised me in place of my parents who passed away when I was young. I wanted to give something back to the two of them who always put me first and supported me, so I had been saving money from part-time jobs since my college days. Seeing my friend smile, my cheeks also relaxed. However, it was Friday afternoon, the day before the trip. I was summoned by the manager and approached her desk. Classify these by category and analyze them. They're documents to be used at the beginning of next week, she instructed, her lips adorned with unusually bright lipstick and a smug smile etched on her face. I blinked in surprise as I saw the pile of thick documents before me. You want me to analyze this by the end of the break? I asked, incredulous. There were several binders, each one incredibly heavy, and they were all disorganized. Just sorting and classifying them alone would likely consume the entire day, let alone analyzing them on top of that. To my bewilderment, the manager responded with a victorious air. I'm glad you understand my orders. You've been ignoring instructions recently, you see. Unable to hold back the unreasonable accusations, I decided to stand my ground. I hate to point out, but it's Friday and there are barely 2 hours left until the end of the day. It's simply impossible to finish these documents by the beginning of next week. I attempted to remain calm, but ever since our part-time worker left, the manager seemed to have singled me out for intensified harassment. She excluded me from office memos, issued incorrect instructions, and then blamed me for misunderstanding. On top of that, she dumped an unmanageable amount of work on me, which clashed with my long-awaited vacation plans. It seemed like my objections didn't bother the manager at all. You're going to use it at the beginning of the week, right? It's fine if you come in over the weekend to finish it. Oh, and just to let you know, these documents are confidential, so don't take them home. Please, wait a second. I tried to argue, but the manager interrupted. I have a meeting soon, and I'm leaving directly from here today, before leaving the pile of documents on the desk and walking out. The next day, my planned trip with my grandparents lay under the expansive sky. As they noticed my stifled yawns, they grew concerned. Are you okay? Staying up all night and then going on a trip? Maybe we should have canceled. I'm fine, don't worry. I was really looking forward to this trip today, I reassured them. Yeah, I could sense their worry knowing I had worked all night and rushed home just in time for our departure. I couldn't let my fatigue dampen our special trip. No, this won't do. It's a special trip, so I have to make it enjoyable. I mustered up some cheer and directed a smile toward my grandparents. Look at this view, it's amazing. The sea is so beautiful. Don't worry about me. I worked hard so that I could enjoy delicious food, soak in the hot spring, and sleep soundly on a fluffy bed. My attempt at lightheartedness seemed to relax them, and they began to enjoy the scenery with relieved expressions. But amidst the enjoyment, a nightmare awaited me. Did you finish the job I asked for? You didn't quit, did you? A familiar voice startled me as I strolled alone in the inn after checking in. Why here of all places? I muttered to myself, but the manager, seemingly reading my thoughts, snorted and left. I ruined your weekend to teach you a lesson. I thought it was unlikely, but as I thought, you ignored my instructions, didn't you? The manager's words felt like a curse, and I was overcome with dizziness. The thought of being given work to ruin my vacation filled me with anger. But how did you know about my plans? I asked, astonished. You were chattering away during break time. Where are you going? When are you going? Oh, I'm so jealous. You were so pleased being praised by everybody. It was hilarious, she replied casually, revealing her eavesdropping habits. Realizing that my innocuous chats with colleagues were being carefully listened to, I felt a chill. Besides, I'm surprised. This ain't as too good for you, she continued, her tone dripping with disdain. Excuse me? I responded, confused. You don't get it. It's an eyesore to see commoners wandering around. Look, there's a rundown inn next door that's more your style, she sneered. I don't understand what you mean. I know you find me an eyesore, but the rest is just insults and harassment, right? I retorted, feeling my anger rise. Just as my frustration reached its peak, a voice of support came from behind me. Is that what this is about? My grandparents had arrived, standing by my side. The people whom I thought were peacefully drinking tea in the room were suddenly standing behind me. Judging from their expressions, they must have overheard almost all of my conversation with the manager. This is, I began hurriedly, but my grandfather cut me off and addressed the manager. Nice to meet you. I'm Angelique's grandfather and have been her guardian for many years. Perhaps it's quicker to tell you that I'm the honorary chairman of the trading company that was discussing a deal with your company the other day. At those words, the manager's face turned pale. The honorary chairman of the industry, but your name is different from this employee's. Yes, she goes by her maternal family name. Otherwise, she would be viewed differently as a member of a famous company's founding family, right? My grandfather explained calmly. I don't want my precious granddaughter to have a tough time at the company where she works. I'm terribly sorry, I had no idea, the manager stammered, her face growing even paler. Do you think ignorance excuses rudeness? My grandfather queried. In contrast to my grandfather's calm demeanor, the manager was sweating profusely and frozen in place. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to relay a message to your company CEO. I'm not interested in doing business with a company that has a manager like you. Well, wait a minute, please, the manager exclaimed, but my grandfather ignored her pleas. My granddaughter joined a company with a great motto: stay healthy, work hard, play hard, and live a long life. I thought the existence of quirky managers was necessary for the growth of the company, but your personality and behavior are harmful, he concluded. If you disagree with what I say, you can ignore it or spread bad rumors about me. My granddaughter has been recording all of this with her camera. Let's see whose side the world is on. With that, he left the scene. As my grandfather had said, I had been recording from the beginning of the trip with a camera hanging around my neck, capturing memories with my grandparents. I had forgotten, but the camera was still rolling at that moment. I began, uncertain of how to react. The manager, trembling, tried to cling to my grandfather but was bluntly told, "It's too late now," and collapsed on the spot. "Wait a minute, can't you do something to help?" she pleaded, turning to me for assistance after being coldly brushed off by my grandfather. "I refuse." "You always say there's nothing a newbie like me can do," I retorted, returning the sarcasm she had given me just the other day. Despite my anger, I managed to keep it in check and even flashed a smile. Yeah, I could probably be an actress too, I thought to myself. Then at the start of the week at work, there was an issue with the manager. The executive who led the running club stood tall in our department since the morning. Our company credo is to practice living healthily, working well, playing well, and living a long life. We welcome hard work, but that doesn't mean forcing people to work, especially not if it compromises their physical and mental health. Executives who dump unreasonable amounts of work on their subordinates are merely showing their lack of managerial skills. The managing director's voice echoed throughout the floor. Excuse me? The manager, seemingly taken aback by being attacked first thing in the morning, was about to ask something calmly while clenching her fist. But the executive continued, "Here, we have the time cards from last Friday to today. There were 5 employees who came to work on Friday and stayed until Saturday morning. 3 people worked on their days off on Saturday and Sunday, and this morning, Angelique came in early." The manager seemed more and more perplexed as she was presented with these records. What does that mean?" she asked, her tone uncertain. I addressed the confused manager, prompted by the managing director. "If I may, you instructed me to finish organizing and analyzing a massive amount of data by the start of the week and told me to work during holidays if necessary. But it was impossible for me alone." Just then, the executive happened to pass by, so I consulted with the people around me. With cooperation across departments, we managed to complete the task as you instructed, spending the amount of time and manpower I just explained. Since the running club members who helped this time were present at the executives' meeting, I took the opportunity to thank them again. I only worked from Friday night to Saturday morning and early this morning after returning from the trip, so I was hardly any help. "But thank you so much for helping me," I added, bowing. In response, I received kind words such as, "We help each other out in times of trouble." And that's what running buddies are for. The manager finally seemed to grasp the situation, and this time she came at me, crossing departments. "You say I didn't authorize such a thing," she accused, seeming intent on blaming me for overstepping her authority. "I approved it," declared the managing director. At these words, the manager was frozen in shock. The newbie in the running group, who always had a smile on her face, was in deep trouble. I heard someone murmur, Upon hearing the situation, I found out they've been burdened with an absurd workload. It would have been fine to leave it be, but since it was work necessary for the company, I took charge and gained everyone's cooperation. I apologized for the post-approval, but first, the managing director's stare bore into the manager. I can't forgive the base motives behind burdening a hard-working employee who's trying to be filial to their grandparents with an impossible task just for harassment, were the most forceful words I'd ever heard the managing director say. His face softened a bit. The other day, my grandchild who visited me cooked up some fried eggs. Heaven recently learned how to make them. They were overly charred and even had eggshells in them, a real mess. But it was the first time my grandchild had cooked something with such dedication. To me, it was the best feast ever, he shared, overlapping his feelings for his grandchild with the sentiments a supervisor should have for their subordinates. Despite the kitchen being a complete mess from my grandchild's cooking, my wife was in high spirits all day. That's just how it is. When I told them it was delicious, the proud smile on the young face was the most endearing thing. The managing director continued, his unexpected story bringing tears to the employees' eyes as they shared memories of their own grandparents. I still can't forget the taste of the rice porridge my grandma made me when I was sick, and the pat on the back my grandpa gave me, saying, "Pain, pain, go away," seemed to heal me faster. The employee reminisced, almost bursting out laughing at the managing director's doting grandparents' stories. Feeling a lump in my throat, I wondered if a present for their grandparents could elicit such an emotional response. The people who helped me that day told me as I bowed, "If you think you're causing trouble, the best way to show us respect is to go and have as much fun as possible," and they set me off on my trip. I love this company, all of you, and of course my job. That's why it's so frustrating to see part-time workers and employees like me being targeted and quitting due to unreasonable demands, I voiced, mustering all the courage I could. A warm round of applause erupted from those around me. However, the manager seemed irritated by this and confronted me. "Do you think it's okay to talk like that?" she challenged. The managing director quickly reprimanded her. "Silence. If you want to stay with this company, you'll lose all your titles and privileges and be demoted to the same status as a new employee. Naturally, you'll be starting from today. So the employee who joined a little before you, Angelique, will be your senior. You should be careful with your words." Upon hearing that the president had also approved, the manager shook her head intensely and yelled, "No, I won't accept this." But there was no help for her. Instead, everyone's cold glares focused on her. "If you don't like it, you're welcome to submit a resignation letter anytime," the managing director concluded. And so the downfall of the manager known as the Empress began. Afterwards, she was literally demoted to a rank-and-file employee. She stuck around the company for a bit, but maybe she couldn't handle the tough treatment she was getting because one day, she just stopped coming in. A few days later, her resignation letter came in the mail. Around that time, our company was being covered on TV. The show titled Morning Exercise. Bonds Beyond Titles was aired, and they even talked about me and my grandparents. I heard later that the viewers loved our company rule: don't tolerate unfairness. The unjust female manager remained anonymous, but the clients clearly knew who she was. Rumor is that she doesn't stand a chance of finding a job in the same industry again. Meanwhile, our company was able to do business with my grandfather's company without any problem. Working with relatives can be a bit embarrassing, but it also keeps me on my toes. Plus, I've become even more popular within the company due to my legendary showdown with the female manager. Whoa, you're so motivated. I want to work with you once I finish graduate school. My best friend recently told me. I'm hoping that'll happen too, I replied. I've started saving again because I want to travel with my grandparents without any worries this time. It'll take time since all I can do is save bit by bit, but just sit tight, Grandma and Grandpa. I'm going to continue to cherish my precious time from here on out.